So welcome. This is the so-called winter session 2, 2 out of 3. And today we have, you already know the agenda, but just a quick reminder, we are going to have a very interesting person give you an intro to bio-design thinking. Then we will have a fun part, the team intros, then an announcement from one of our partners, and then we will tell you more about the next steps and the first real deliverables. It's going to take about an hour in total, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. So let's jump right to it. Today we have with us Mehroz Ehsan, who is going to tell you, who is going to conduct a guest lecture on bio-design thinking. It is a problem-solving framework, and you probably have heard about design thinking before. Against the current educational system, which mostly focuses on solving stuff. So like at schools, you know that you get exercise books with specific exercises that you need to submit. And then at the university, you get assignments, or maybe you get projects, but the focus is still on the solution. And against this background, design thinking is a really useful tool to have in your head, because it tries to look for the problems that are worth solving. And the person who is going to speak to today has so we can do a very long intro, but I will just make a short one. Mehroz has worked and consulted for a number of healthcare startups, along with having worked as an investment associate in healthcare venture capital. He has also been part of the European Institute of Technology's Starship program for health innovation, first as a participating fellow, then as a mentor. Mehroz has completed the Oxford Biodesign program and mentored design thinking groups in the UK, Europe, and Canada. He has a PhD in medicine from the University of Oxford, and is currently obtaining another medical degree from the Western University in Ontario, Canada. So Mehroz, I'm giving the floor to you. I think I will need to make you a host now. Can you share, maybe you can share the screen already, or should I make you a host?
I'm not able to, so if you could.
Okay, Mehroz, you are a host now.
Okay, can you see it all right? Okay, great. Thank you, Andre, for the introduction. That's too gracious. I feel like you probably introduced biodesign thinking better than I have, so maybe you should have started. So hi, everyone. My name is Mehroz. I'm a clinician scientist in training in Canada. And I got introduced, I met Inga during the Starship program, and have been involved in design thinking and biodesign, not just from a healthcare perspective, but recently also in the humanities, working with the UNHCR. I have my background, as mentioned before, doing a PhD in cardiovascular genetics, working on commercialization of drugs in rare cardiovascular diseases, and I'm currently finishing my medical training in Canada. So we'll start off with what is design thinking. So this is a mouthful. Design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. This really means. So I think Andre already touched a bit upon this. The real focus in design thinking is to identify the problem that someone is facing. Or if you have a specific problem in an area for biotech, for example, what is that problem? Really understanding it well and using that to drive innovation. So you've seen in the past where a lot of research has been done and a lot of different technologies have been made. So for example, somebody made, oh, how can we catch a certain wavelength of waves that are going in or out of a certain place, but we don't know how to use it. Or let's just make, in biology, let's just identify or make proteins for the sake of it, and we're making these proteins, but we have no use for it. Whereas now you can see people designing specific entities in biology and outside for solving a particular problem. But even within that problem, it needs to be really designed really well, to be really specific, to target, and that's where the innovation would come in. I'll give you a few examples to make this a bit more clear as we move forward. So what does it really mean? Where does it come from? And I think, as Andre mentioned a bit, it's you seek inspiration from the problems that people are facing by interacting with them, by observing them, and by understanding them more deeply. You ideate, so this is like a constant process of like, okay, what could this be? How could we go about solving this problem, or how could we go across like thinking about this problem and then implementing it? And you go, as the circles would identify, you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So this whole idea of like constantly being at it, it's not, we won't show you a way, or design thinking or biodesign thinking would not tell you a way where you would just solve problems in the first instance. There's a lot of iterations, there's a lot of back and forth that you'll have to do, which at times is really frustrating for people, but it is a process that works if you implement it properly. So just to give you an overview of like what design thinking or what biodesign thinking generally is. So it's divided into three major parts. The first one's identify. So what does it mean by identify? Means identifying needs. And so need could be in general, whenever before design thinking became really ubiquitous or common among people, people said, okay, I'm going to go in biotechnology, let's say, I'm going to go cure cancer. That's not specific enough. How do you go beyond that? Like what type of cancer? What specific protein are you targeting? What different modality are you targeting? Or if you were to do medtech, oh, I want to reduce people who have heart failure. Okay, so what aspect of it? Is it related to the heart? Is it related to the people's lifestyle? Is it related to biology? Is it related to genetics? How do you better understand that? And you screen all of those needs to find the best one that you want to take forward. The next stage is to invent. So this is where you develop a concept of like, okay, how do we go about solving this problem? Like, how do we make a solution for this problem? And you will then talk to experts, you'll then talk among peers, to other groups, seek in the literature, what's out there, what's not, and how do we go, what's the best way of doing it? And finally implement it. Like, how do we take this to the people who require it the most, or out towards, so that it's accessible for other people? And though these here are identified as identify, invent, and implement as separate entities, there's a lot of back and forth. You can be at the implement stage and then go back to the identify stage. And that has happened to me in the past as well, where we're like, okay, we're really certain that this would work. When we go start implementing it, nobody wants it, because clearly we did not identify the need properly. So I'll go a bit more detail about like how and what are the tools and what are the things that can really help you throughout this process as you go in the next few workshops. So in an overview, when you go for a need, there's countless needs that you can find. So I'll give you an example. So we worked on a project where we wanted to, the problem given to us was there's a lot of people and who have rare diseases, and there's a lot of clinical trials that are happening, right? But we don't get enough patients for those clinical trials. How do we get more patients to clinical trials? So on the face of it, the problem that most people identify, okay, we just need to bring people to the clinical trial site, and that's a need. But if you dig deeper into that whole idea, you'll be like, okay, people are not coming. How do we bring them forward? Maybe clinical trials are not accessible. Maybe clinical trials are not the right disease. Maybe the people hosting them are not credible. Maybe it's a case of money being spent on them, or like how much time they have to spend on it. Or maybe it's a case of organization. Maybe it's a case of EMRs being not regular. So these electric medical records not being organized. So you calculate all these needs by talking to these people, and then you narrow them down to like your top 2 or 3 needs after you talk to people. Then from these, you would then generate different concepts. For each of these needs, you could generate 3 to 5 concepts or even more. And then you try out and talk to people and iterate on them and find the best one, and then finally move to the final concept. And even at this stage, you could say, okay, maybe this is not working and I need to go back to my needs and find a better need that's more relatable to what the problem is at hand. Feel free to ask any questions, like just raise your hands. There's a raise hand function in Zoom, and then we can ask questions at any point if it's not clear.
Mehroz, sorry, just a short interruption. To everyone, this time the unmuting thing is enabled, so it's not necessary for you to write into the chat. You can just raise the hand and you can unmute yourself and ask the question with voice.
Okay, great. So to give you an example of like what it is in real life, right? So has anybody heard of PillPack? Okay, there's a lot of like shaking of heads and not really, I'm guessing. So essentially, before, let's just put 5 years ago, a lot of people would go to, whenever they're prescribed medicine, they would go to the pharmacy, go line up, try to get the medicine if they have the time, not during working hours and afterwards if the shop's open or not, the pharmacist is open or not, get the medication, bring it back. And this whole process was like a lot more cumbersome than the medication given to them to relieve their pain. So a lot of people are trying to tackle this problem and say, okay, how can we make this easy? And especially with the case of older people, if you notice older people who have like any chronic disease, they are on 10, 12 medication at the same time. And sometimes you have to take once weekly, something is like once daily, something is twice daily, something's only after food or before food. So there's like a big problem, and a lot of people are trying to solve, okay, how can we give medications? You have these bottle openers, or you have like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, there's bottles with like Monday, Tuesday written or AM, PM. So this company tried to use design thinking to solve this problem. So they were in the Stanford Biodesign program, and they're like, oh, how do we tackle this? So they started talking to patients and providers and see what is the issue that they face? Why are they not taking the medication? And why do they lapse in it? And so they came up with this platform where they make this box, which already has these packs made according to time and date, which you just have to remove one at a time. And these are filled by the pharmacist when it's ordered and delivered to your home. So the patients, once prescribed, take this pill, the pack, that's why the name pill pack, and they're like, okay, this is Monday 8 a.m. This is what I have to take. Then the next one will come out at Monday 12 a.m. And so you don't miss a single time, and everything's synchronized. So this solves such a big problem of like medical adherence and like trying to get medicines for older people and to remind themselves of like what and when these medications are taken. And so this company was acquired for $1 billion by Amazon a couple of years ago. And that's how big the company value, that's how big the issue they were solving. So they didn't go after like, I'm going to provide medicines for everybody. They just really focus on the elderly and their problem of like managing all these medications. Another example was like people when they had heart failure and they would come to the clinic, they would suspect, okay, maybe they have cardiac arrhythmia and that's causing them to increase risk of stroke. Maybe they have issues with their heart. So in older days, we had this big Walkman style, like this big device that you had to carry around everywhere. And patients had to bring it back to the hospital and say, okay, this is the data, go analyze it. So these guys were using design thinking principle wanted to say, okay, how can we make this less cumbersome for the people? How can we make this mobile? And so that the patients don't have to come back to give us the data. So they made this device called CEO by iRhythm Technologies, which then recorded your ECG remotely, and they would get it over Wi-Fi. So this was one of the first technologies. Now everybody has Apple Watch where you can do one lead ECG. But this is like a 6-lead ECG, which gives you way better signal to identify patients. So they, at that time, this was about 6-7 years ago, identified this need and went after it, and now people are innovating in this space. So another one to go really biotech is that there's this technique of cell painting. So a lot of times you would give drugs and you don't know what would happen to a cell, or you would know that a certain cell would respond in a similar way. So endothelial cells would respond in this way, but I don't know how my eye cells or my liver cells or my muscle cells would respond. So what this company did was, this company is called Recursion Pharma. What they did was they took all the cells, different types of cells, put in took one gene at a time and knocked them out. So remove them, or use different drugs on all the different cell types and took pictures of them at every time. And now, so they have a catalog of library where they're like, okay, we know how every cell looks like after every treatment. So if you make a new drug now, you can treat cells with the drug and we can tell you which genes are affected by matching the images for the gene knockouts we have to your drug. So now you can tell whether a drug can affect your cell negatively or positively. So this was, before this was a big problem because people didn't know, oh, we have these images or we have these drugs, how do we combine this? So these guys came up with a solution for that, looking at, okay, this is a problem for pharmaceutical companies because they don't know whether drugs are forming or not. They knew this was a problem for the genetics researchers because they have this data and they don't know how to apply it to drug discovery. So they combine both of it together to find a solution which helps all of them. So how do we go about problem identification? So it's like, for some people, it seems like, well, I have so many problems out there that I want to be solved, but the identification is not simple. So for you, it might be a problem that, you know what, I need my drink that doesn't get warm, like just becomes cold. How do I warm it? For another person, it might not be a problem because they have other people bringing them hot coffee all the time, or they can go step downstairs and go to a coffee machine and make new one. So a problem occurs when there's a difference between what should be and what is, between the ideal and the actual situation. So I mentioned about monitoring those ECGs for these patients. So right now, at that time for them, there's this big device people had to carry everywhere. People could not move with it. They had to be over a week. So how it really affected the function of the patient. So they wouldn't do it. So how could it be? Like, how could we make it smaller? How could we make it accessible? How could we make it faster? How could we make the data seamless? So it's like, that's how you approach that problem. And that's something that you guys will also be tackling while you're doing whatever area you want to go in. Further, it's like learning by doing is a form of problem solving that takes place in the use environment. So what it means is that you'll have to try, like once you have a problem, like try to come up with solutions or try to make a solution for it and see if it works. And then use those learnings to go back, iterate, understand the problem better, and then go forward. So research into problem solving shows that it consists of trial and error. So a lot of times people say, okay, trial and error, and you might say that's just getting lucky. But it's only getting lucky if you don't understand the process. It's like if I try in a certain ways, and I know this does not work, but why does it not work? How can I improve the next design that I make to move forward better, right? So that's really important that you learn every time. So I think it's like Einstein's quote that like, I haven't failed 99 times, I find 99 ways of like how things don't work. And that's really important here because like, unless and until you really truly understand the problem, you cannot make like the solution that will be adopted by all. And that's like one of the emphasis that I want to focus on is that problem identification is like the key part for you to go into any venture. Like it's okay to spend a lot of time doing this process and in the future trying to really understand what the problem is and what the need is to go for it. And so in biodesign, one of the key things that they teach us is like, how do you define a problem? And there's this key need statement thing. So the need statement is like outlining how do we define the problem, which is like a way to address the problem in a population for that outcome. So how does this translate to the examples that I gave in before to you, right? So it was like a way to address polypharmacy, which is like multiple drugs given to elderly. So polypharmacy is like, how do you manage multiple drugs in population? So elderly with chronic diseases that outcome would be like so that they adhere to medication, right? I could have said, okay, you know what? I want everybody to take their medications and I want a solution for this. And that would have not let me go anywhere because I would have been running in circles because, oh, Igor might have a different problem. His mom might have a different problem. Grandma might have a different problem. And I'm trying to solve it for everybody. So trying to really focus really helps you narrow down and come up with a solution better. And obviously, once you have a solution, you can extend it to other people. Maybe I have the same problem, like I forget it. But if there's a machine that tells me every morning right there, okay, this is the thing that you have to take it, even if it's supplements, I would know, right? So it would, as long as you really narrow it down and you really focus, then you can go to a solution. But one key thing here is in the need statement, you cannot put a solution in there because by default, our education system, like the way I've done, like for example, I've done my PhD in genetics, and if somebody else comes in and says, "Oh, how about we do like just take DNA and just see its image and try to come up with what the differences are," and I'm like, "That's not possible, right?" But then somebody else comes up and does it because I'm limited by what I'm being told and what I've learned, right? So if I already picture as genetics always has to be sequencing based or like has to be a certain sequencing based, I will limit myself to find a solution which is totally unique and innovative. So whenever you define, this is the key thing here, the need statement, it's that you have to identify it without the solution being in mind and keep it broad enough that you're open to new ideas. And one of the things that really helps me in finding solutions is not like, how can this not work? Because that's like how scientists are usually programmed. Okay, we're trained to bash other people's findings because of like, oh, how does this not work? But instead of thinking, how can I make it work? And that really helps you change and frame the problem in a very different way. So one key thing that I really want to emphasize, which is not emphasized in most biodesign things, is empathy, right? So what does empathy mean to you guys? Can anybody tell me?
The ability to think in another person's perspective, in another person's shoe.
Okay. And anybody else?
Compassion and ability to understand the other person as well.
Yeah, great. And so, can you still see my screen? Is it fine, Igor?
You switched into slide mode, just if you go into presentation mode. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so that's pretty good. But yeah, so I think empathy is like really understanding the other person. And can anybody explain to me like what the difference between empathy and sympathy is?
Sympathy is thinking to one's emotional level, just like paying pity to one's, and it doesn't really do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Sorry, go ahead.
So I studied psychology, and there's 4 different types of empathy. So there's the type of empathy which would basically be a mirror neuron thing where you feel what the other person is feeling. And then there's cheerful empathy where you feel good because the other person feels good. And then sympathy, which I feel bad because the other person feels bad. So am I having a similar emotion or am I having a complementary one based on how they're feeling? Would be kind of how I would define it.
That's terrific. Yeah, I mean, you've defined it better than I could have. But definitely, I think so. Empathy is a really key thing while doing design thinking because it all starts with you understanding what the problem is and what that population is actually facing. So a lot of times we are in this habit now where we listen to answer. Everybody is listening to say, okay, what can I answer next, or how can I add to the conversation, or how can I give more insights than the other person was doing. But while you're doing design thinking and you're trying to identify a problem, it's really important to empathize with the other person to see, okay, if I was in their shoes, as you guys said, how would I feel about this, right? A lot of times we think, okay, that's not even a problem for you. Like, why can't you just take medicines? You know, like somebody's told you Monday you take this one, Tuesday you take this one, morning you take this one. Like, what's the problem? But like when you actually are taking medication yourself, how many of you guys have like forgotten to take medication? How many of you guys have like forgotten to take all those antibiotics that you're supposed to take, right? And if you put yourself in that position, really understand what is going on with them, it really helps you understand, okay, what are the different ways it is challenging to them. It's often said, like, like, for example, there's this example of saying, oh, if somebody comes to you and says, I want a hammer, and you're like, okay, that's simple enough. And you're like, why do you want the hammer? And they're like, okay, we wanted to put a painting on the wall. And if you're just listening, you're like, here you go, the hammer. But if you're really empathizing with a person, but why does he want the painting there? Because it looks good. But like, why does it want to feel good? Because like there's more going on there. Is there other things that they could really do to really help them? So it's like trying to, if you don't empathize with them, you won't get to the root cause of what the problem is. And if you don't get to the root cause of the problem, there's a plethora of like solutions out there that a lot of people don't use, and you'll just add to it, right? So that's where you want to go. So I think next. Is it going to the next slide? Oops. Okay. Okay. So how can just quickly, how can you empathize? So it's like, who are we empathizing with? Like, what's their background? What's their age? What decisions do they make on a daily basis? Like, how does it affect them? What do these users see in a particular problem that they are facing? It's not your perspective, it's their perspective. What do they talk about? And what do they do, and what are their lifestyles? So for example, if you take care for the elderly, what are they doing? If you're talking about people who are working, are they going to work? Like, can they come to the hospital or not come to the hospital? What do the defined users hear about? And what do they think or feel about a certain problem? Is it really an important thing? You can ask a lot of people about, oh, I want to make it easy for you to make a juice at home, which is going to be like just delivered to you. Like, you don't have to worry about it. But do I care about it? Is it a really important thing for me? Like, a lot of times there's this big Silicon Valley startup that started making juice, a blender, where they actually had a squeeze bottle which would go into a machine, but the squeeze bottle already had a juice there. And they sold the machine which didn't do anything. But they were just trying to farm, like, and nobody cared about it still, right? Even though it was a high-tech thing. But it's like, how do we really empathize with the population to really come up with a solution that would work? So now I've added a few more things. We started with ideate, prototype, and evolve, and implement. But first you identify and then empathize. The empathy will lead you to defining the problem really well, and then ideate. And this is a constant loop of design thinking where you go back and forth. Once you implement and evolve, you go back and identify, okay, what's not working with the users? How are they feeling about it? Like, what do they want changed? A lot of times people are not good at telling you what they want. That's always true. Even if you talk to your friends about their feelings, they won't tell you exactly how they feel or what they want from you. But it's your job to really empathize with them and understand what they really want, and then go and listen again. So that's really important. So one of the key things here that really helps me, and I did it with you with the painting thing, is the 5 whys. And like Inga is here, and I've done it with her, which drives her nuts because she's like, why do you ask it? So whenever you have a problem, you have to ask it, okay, why is it happening? And if it's happening, why is that? And then you ask 5 whys. This was made by Toyota in Japan first, and this was like their way of like engineering better cars. Like, okay, why is this problem happening? How can we improve on them? But why is why? So to give you an example, an easy one, it's like, so the problem was like somebody ran through a red light. Why did they run through a red light? You're like, okay, they were late for work. Why were they late for work? They woke up late. Why did they wake up late? The alarm clock broke. Why? Because they didn't check if it worked. Why? Because they forgot to do it last night. So at every stage of the problem, so if you're like, okay, they ran through like red light because they were late for work. So how do we solve them getting late for work? So you'll be thinking, okay, how do we solve them late for work? Because there'll be so many solutions out there. But if you delve a bit deeper, it's like they woke up late. Okay, so how do we solve for them not waking up late? If you go a bit deeper into it, so their alarm clock broke. So, okay, how do we solve for the alarm clock breaking? And then if you go deeper, it's like, didn't check if it worked or forgot to do it last night. So this is the core problem of it, right? If you're solving at the top, you wouldn't have come up with a solution that everybody would have adopted. But if you're at the end where like you need a reminder or an alarm clock that buzzes at night, which tells you, or maybe not even an alarm clock, somebody else comes in and tells you or calls you, right? That's where a solution which everybody would adopt. So it's really, really helps you go through like, have I really, really understood the problem which I want to solve? So what does it bring you? I've given you a lot of medtech examples. In biotech, you see a lot of meat, like meat's becoming the big issue, hot topic, and people don't want to eat meat, whether you want to do vegetarians, whether it's good for the environment, whether we've run out of cattle to give us meat and stuff. And this is where Beyond Meat and all these other alternative meats have come in, because they saw a problem. They saw that, okay, a lot of people don't want to eat classic meat. It's really bad for the environment, right? Like the easier solution that we've been given for decades is like, okay, become vegetarian, right? But nobody wants to be vegetarian. People still want to feel the taste of meat in their like mouth, right? And it's like, how do you really understand your user saying, okay, I want an alternate meat, but I don't want to give up meat? Most of the people would have given up. Well, it's not possible. Just eat meat or become a vegetarian. What is it? But really, you understand, you're like, they want to feel that they're eating meat, and that's the main thing. It tastes that they're feeling meat. And that was the core problem. It's like, okay, how do we recreate it? So they came up with these different meat items, which is like, okay, these are alternate meat. We're not using animals. We're going to make it a plant-based food. We're still going to feel like meat, and it's still going to taste like meat. And it's become a revolution, and you see like a lot of people coming in. So that's where, like, if you, unless and until you really understand, and if you're looking at broader view, you won't be able to solve or like really innovate. The real solutions that other people have not thought about will really come in when you go empathize with the users, really understand the problem. And that like empathy and that perspective is unique to you. Each one of you has different backgrounds. Each one of you have grown up in different ways in different environments. So your way of looking at problems will be different. As a team, a lot of times it happens that when you come as a team, you lose your initial thought or your unique ideation of it. So it's really important to think about problems individually and then come up in teams and say, okay, this is what I think this person meant. A lot of times we listen to somebody speaking or maybe me speaking and you're like, oh, I thought he said this, or I thought he said this, or I thought, but like if all of you come together and say, okay, this is what I thought they meant, and then come ideate and then come back to me and say, is this what you meant? Or does this matter to you? Or how does that make you feel? That would really improve the process of how you innovate or become better innovators. So one last thing is like, again, like the emphasis is like innovation is a discipline that can be learned. Nobody's just born thinking of great ideas. I have a belief that no idea is unique. It's just rehashing somebody else's thought in your own way. And that's what it is. But just to be sure and keeping adhering to biodesign principles, there's no innovation without experimentation. You have to constantly iterate. It's frustrating at times, but it's a process that works. And it's shown great rewards for people who've kept at it. And just like one last thing, I think this is like an outline I could send you, like how the whole biodesign process breaks up and how you can break it down to small parts. So you don't have to think about biodesign as a whole, like how do I go about this? And I'll just share it with you guys later on as well. So that's it for me. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Mehroz.
Yeah, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if there are any questions, you can unmute and ask them.
You can ask it in the chat function as well if you don't want to ask questions.
Or you can use the chat as well, of course.
Or maybe I was too clear or really unclear. I don't know then.
A very good presentation, Mehroz. Thank you. Maybe I'll just add one point from myself. Though Mehroz was mostly mentioning, let's say, patients and healthcare, but absolutely the same if we talk about any need. If you're deciding to build something for, let's say, industrial application, you really need to get in touch with people who might be using who has this problem. It could be manager in a factory. It could be someone working in a lab. It could basically, you need to identify who is this person who you're building the solution in the future for.
Yeah, so I'll give a bit, like, because nobody's asking questions. So I'll give you an example of like biotech, right? In biotech, design thinking is not just about experiments. It's also about the people working in biotech, right? If I have a biotech firm and I need to hold clinical trials, or if I'm managing inventory, or if I'm talking to other people, sharing ideas, how do I make this better, right? Those are problems that biotech people face every day. Like, how do I recruit people better? And if you want to go more towards the molecular pathways, it's like, okay, so if I have these molecules and I'm just going to go try like on different diseases, but like, what is the disease you want to solve? And it can't just be like, oh, I want to solve Parkinson's disease, right? You're like, okay, within Parkinson's, there's like 50 different mutations. Each mutation has different people, or there's different proteins that you want to target. So if you really focus on what protein you want to target in Parkinson's, or what symptom, like for example, in Parkinson's, people have tremors. In Parkinson's, people have issues with fatigue. In Parkinson's, they have muscle issues. So if I target a specific aspect of Parkinson's, I'll have a way better outcome, and people would be willing to adopt it way better than if I go for the whole disease, which is like, in a baseball analogy, it's like a home run that you have. But like, if you make incremental increases, that in itself will reward you, will be rewarded for that. Okay.
Mehroz, there is a question. How many
Yeah.
whys are too many whys?
So generally 5 whys usually gets you the answer. But if you're not answering the whys properly, and you're giving the same answers for the second or third why, then you're going to be in an infinite loop of whys. But if you answer them really well, I think 5 whys should get you the core problem. Sometimes maybe 4 whys might get you away, but 5 is like usually every time. And I think Inga can testify that the 5th one usually gets you to it. So I don't know why it works. Don't ask me why 5 times again. But it's like usually till the 5th why it does work. The next question is, if innovation can be learned, what about people who consistently coming up with new ideas like Bach, Mercer? So, I mean, there's one, like, you have to separate out innovation from ideation, right? Ideation definitely is a part of innovation, and people would come up with new ideas. I don't know about like musicians coming up with new ideas and how you would relate to it. It's more artistic, and like, it is driven by their inspiration and how they feel, and they really understand how they feel and how they can translate it into music, right? Or it might be the case that how they feel, they empathize with somebody else and how they can translate it as music as a medium, right? But I'm not sure like whether that could be applied here, where this is like more of an art form, like how do I transform it into like whatever I'm feeling into an art form, whether like innovation I would say that's innovation, that's their artistry. But innovation can be learned. People do come up with ideas, but the whole process of like, oh, I want to solve this thing for this person can be an idea. Oh, I have this idea of like, okay, you know what, I had this idea the other day of like, how do we make physicians talk to each other better? But from taking from that idea to actual solution, from executing it to making it something that people will use and buy and pay you for it, that's the whole process that you want to get into. So yes, there might be some sources of inspiration that people will get, but it's a product of where they are. It's a product of how they've grown up. It's a product of what they know, what they're educated on, what information they have that other people do not have. And so all of those things combine towards those new insights. It's this, I can't remember the exact quote, it's Peter Thiel said that, okay, what is that one thing that you know about your field that everybody thinks otherwise, right? And that has come from your experience, that has come from the way you see things in a certain light. And that would really drive that innovation. And so, as I said before, like there's no unique idea, it's just a different way of looking at things that other people have looked at. Design thinking wasn't born in Stanford, like biodesign thinking was born. It's like people have been doing it, but in different ways. They've maybe structured it in a different way. So it's like new ideas come in, but it's just like a different perspective of seeing things. And for you to come up with new ideas, how can I come up with new ideas? It's like, look at how other people have solved different problems. How did they approach a different problem? Or like, look at how your peers are thinking about it. Okay, how can I think about it that way? A lot of times I'm in positions where I'm like, this friend of mine thinks in a certain way or reacts in a certain way. I was like, okay, how would Gabriella do this? Or how would she think about this? Or how would this friend think about this? And that's like a really good way of thinking about ideating about new problems or like new solutions. So how do you fight the question, if this is so great, why hasn't it been done before? Yeah, so that's a really great question, right? It's like, if you like, I mean, a lot of times it's so obvious for people. That's the easy answer. Like a lot of times it's so obvious that people inside do not think about it. So there's this, I'm not sure like how much of a craze people have like about stock trading and like people doing it. And so before that, before like a few years ago, only people with big businesses could trade stocks or buy stocks and stuff. And now everybody under the sun can buy stocks. What changed? Like everybody should have been allowed to do it. It was a few people like who made this platform. They were like in finance, but they were just starting off. And they were like, oh, why don't we make it open for everybody else? And people were like, who were in finance are like, that's stupid. Nobody would want to get involved. Nobody would want to do it, right? A lot of people who are specialists in a certain area are really risk averse and have a certain way they're trained to think about things, right? So they would not deviate from it. So new incumbents when come in have a new way of thinking about it. But if this is so great, it's like you are thinking about the right problem, but it hasn't been done before because probably they did not know something that you have an insight on, right? A lot of people tried pharmacy delivery, but in this way for elderly, but they did not think about or empathize with the elderly that they forget when the medication has to be taken. So this person who made this had his mom who would forget this, and he would see this every day, and he would manage this medication for them, and like in boxes, or come in and say, okay, this is what this is, or this is what this is. This has to be taken today. Let me make a script for you, or let me separate these out for you. And so he witnessed it every single day. So he knew something that nobody else knew, that insight. And that's where like the empathy part, that's where the user observation part comes in, that you have to come in. Generating an idea saying, a lot of people would dismiss you because like, if this is so great, why hasn't it done before? But that's where the hard part is, right? It's like really understanding, why did the other things fail? Did they really go into detail of like what the need was? Or am I approaching it in a different way? And a lot of times, I can tell you enough times, a lot of times things are so obvious, but people just miss it. And maybe you made it, like Uber is there, right? Taxis were there for generations. Like, why didn't anybody make it before? It was right there. People are calling taxis, or people are hailing taxis. Why couldn't anybody else make a simple app? Like, it was like, in hindsight, it looks super obvious. Why didn't anybody else come up with it? But it's just like that person who was there actually made Uber because they were trying to call these limousines and they couldn't track them, and they made it for the limousines to solve their problem, and then it became it for everybody. So it's like, it's obvious, and it's like, why hasn't it done before? Because a lot of times people haven't even thought about it in that way, and maybe you have a unique way of thinking about it. So don't be discouraged by that. I think that's like, if people are thinking it's so great, that's like a great start for you, but you need to explore it a bit more and make it more obvious. Anything else? I think I've run out of time as well for everybody. So,
any more questions, guys? Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, Mehroz was my mentor for my team, and we were working exactly with the problem framing. And just to share as an experience, it's much more complicated than it seems. It seems that it's like, yeah, I ask 5 questions and I get the answer. But exactly as Mehroz said, actually, it might be that you have to ask 10 times the question why, because it's repetitive, because you're not getting to the next why. And it is a key actually to making your life easier later on. And as we know from statistics, 90% of startups fail just because there is no problem which they are approaching. Market doesn't need it. So this moment of making sure that you know what problem you're solving, it really pays off to give it a more time invested. And it's not as easy as it seems. At least for me, it was much harder than I thought it would be. Thank you, Mehroz. Amazing presentation.
Thank you. And like, just to add to it, like, and I tell you, like, I've done this and I'm giving you a presentation. So when I did the biodesign program at Oxford, like, we had this problem of like they gave us a scenario and they said a patient comes in to do an MRI scan. It's post-surgery and they have this bandage, but the bandage is leaking. So sometimes post-surgery leaks fluid. And they're like, they had 10 minutes to call. They took 10 minutes to call to the surgeon and ask them what to do. So this was in like 2018 and we're like, okay, maybe they couldn't call the surgeon, maybe they didn't have signals, maybe like they didn't know who it was or like what it is. And maybe we came up with solutions, let's make a pager which would work everywhere in the hospital. We thought it was like really cool, going back to the old ways because, or maybe make Wi-Fi's everywhere, right? But like we never really, I mean, we took it as an example to solve it, but we never really went and talked to the doctors and like the radiographers in detail, asked them what was the problem with. So 1 year fast forward, somebody in Toronto made us use the same example. Like obviously they observed it and they saw that actually the problem was that the people didn't know whether a doctor was inside the hospital or not and which ward they were in to track them down. And they've just made a platform for that because now they understand and see what the problem was in detail and talking to 10 different radiographers and 10 different surgeons. And they recently raised like $2.5 million for it. So like we were there, but we didn't spend enough time trying to really explore what the problem is beyond like what we see. Like talk to the people who are actually experiencing it day in day. And they like, there was a doctor in it and there was a radiological technician and those two made a team and hired a software engineer and went for it. And now they're in like 4 different hospitals expanding and everybody wants it because nobody knows where doctors are and this wastes a lot of time. So like, just to give you an example, like it is really, really hard, especially when you're at that moment where you're like, okay, I have all of this figured out. You need somebody else to come in and say, no, this is not what we won't use it. So it is a lot complicated, but it gets better. Like as you do more and more of it, it does get better.
Any other questions? Yeah, I think for now we're out of questions. Once again, Mehroz, big thank you for the presentations,
Not
for the presentation and for the QA. The presentation will be shared on the EIT platform in a couple of days' time, probably. So you will get the chance to look at this complicated part in the end in more detail.
Yeah. Sounds great. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing it so that you get that.
Great, thank you very much. Then we are going to be moving on to the next part of our session. And I will share my screen again. All right. So now comes the fun part, the team intros. You are going to see a bit more of the people who are participating in this year's Biocatalyst Innovation Lab. And so we have all the team pictures on the slides in order, so from 1 to 15. And I'll be switching the slides. And one person from the team who is on the slide, can you please unmute yourself and just do a very quick intro, like what's your team name and maybe what you figured out, what you have in common, and then we'll move on to the next team. All right. So starting with team 1.
Hi, we are Desi for Medi, and we really like books.
All right, cool. You are not alone on that, I think, in this particular video call. So next one, team Vaco. Are probably deciding who's gonna unmute. Well, it's a big team. We have a 8-person team hopefully they're going to be able to work together.
So yeah, our team is Vaco and we all like cat.
All right, cool, thank you. Next one.
Hi everyone, so it's our STEMinist team number 3 and we have a passion for science and genetics. Thanks.
Cool, thank you. A very, very sleek picture. I like it. Next one.
Hey guys, we are Team XR and we all like mangoes.
Is there anything that XR stands for? Like extra, I don't know, extraordinary or something like that?
It's a secret for now.
All right, cool. Trade secrets, I love those. So next one.
Hi. So we're focusing on cosmetics. So our team name is Maybe She's Born With It, Maybe It's Biohacked. And at one point we all lived in the countryside. Some of us currently do. Yeah.
Thank you. Going to the next team.
Hello there. Yeah, we're team number 6, the Rocket Woman. So we all have in common is that we love a good book. And also we're trying to find the best recipe for brownies. And as well, we love to do hiking in the forests and also mushroom hunting. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So before I switch to the next team, I've seen in the chat that some people are asking for the topics. So for those who will come next, for the rest of the teams, if you can also briefly mention your challenge topic direction, that would be also nice. So next one of my favorites actually.
Hello everyone, we are Grape and we all have a name initial in common in our team name. So for example, my name is Alexei and I'm A. And obviously our topic is fruits and we all love fruits.
Nice, this acronym detail, really cool. So next we have probably Fast and the Furious, I would suspect.
Our team name actually is Protein Smiths. And our topic is about physiological proteins. Actually, Vin Diesel is there because we sadly didn't have the picture of our teammates in time, so we acquired a Henson stand-in for her. Yeah, and what we have in common, we all like art of some kind, whether it's design or modern art or drawing ourselves.
Thank you, Anna. I must admit that it's a good life hack. It works in terms of the picture. So next one.
Hi guys, we are Biotech, so we are in charge of like precision fermentation. So that's why we call ourselves protein technology. So we are hoping that we can use proteins in a different way.
Thank you. Thank you. Cool. Thank you. Okay, next one.
Hi. So we are a clean team because our topic is about reducing the strain on the environment using biotechnology. And what we have in common, as you can guess, is that we love mountains.
Cool, thank you. It looks like what was it called? Mount Rushmore, right? With the US presidents, but only high up in the north, supposedly. Okay, next one.
Hi, we're team Tavitronic Superdome, and our topic is how can waste materials be better degraded or reprocessed using biotechnological capabilities. And the thing we have in common is that we all have studied abroad.
Nice, thank you. This picture just makes me feel good inside. I don't know why. Maybe a psychologist will answer this question. So next one.
Hello, we are team 12, and our topic's about the same as the last one, basically reprocessing waste to gain some useful products. And obviously our name is related, wasted gold. And our trait in common is that we all love mozzarella cheese.
Nice, joining that too. Next we have.
Oh, hi. Number 13, our team is called Marcella. Our topic is concerning artificial intelligence and machine learning. And Marcella, by the way, is fungus, and we came to a conclusion that it is our most favorite fungus from now.
Cool. This is the first time I've heard of a mascot, which is a mushroom.
Yeah, it resembles a little bit the brain of, and since we are dealing with artificial intelligence, we thought that it's a good fit.
Cool, thank you. All right, next we have.
Team's name is X Team because one of the team members likes movie X-Files. And topic is about machine learning in biotechnology, and the common thing we all like attending hackathons.
Fair enough, fair enough. So you have one Scully and three Mulders there. And so thank you very much. And last but definitely not least.
Hi, we're team Biocatalyst, and we'll be looking at the future of bioreactors. And after multiple rounds of self-reflection and psychoanalysis, we found out that what we have in common is that all of us like sober dancing.
Cool, thank you, thank you. I should try dancing sober sometime as well. Always somehow happens otherwise. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed the picks. I hope you too. This was fun. And so now we're going to, after a short announcement from our partners, we're going to get to the meaty part of the session. I'm going to tell you about the next deliverables. But before that, as I mentioned, a short announcement. Sorry, just a second. Okay, I checked the chats. Maybe there was something, some action point there, but I think we're clear to go. Yes, so getting back to that, our friends at the Venture faculty, which is a venture hub in Riga, asked us if we could tell you about one of their companies, which is called Smartomica. And they're currently looking for new people. Smartomica is building an AI-based medical and genomic data analytics tools to produce insights that are really practical for treating specific conditions. And they have a spin-off, which is called iImmuno, which is developing IT solutions for the personalized diagnostics of patients who have cancer, specific type of cancer. And they are looking for a lead project manager slash CEO, as well as a senior data scientist. So they're kind of biotechnology and info technology. So we are going to share the specifics with you shortly in an email, in a separate email. If you are interested, there will be contacts, and you can just contact the company directly and talk to them. All right. announcement time over. Now for the next steps. So now we are going to ask you to roll up your sleeves. I mean, not literally now, but after this, it's going to be time to actually apply stuff and to research stuff. So we have 2 deliverables for you to make it more structured. And the first one is resonating really well with what Mehroz said in his lecture just some time ago. The first step that we're going to go through is to actually defining the problems, defining the needs. And so what you're going to do is you're going to start researching your challenge topics, which are pretty broad. So you're going to narrow them down to something more specific. And you'll need to come up with 3 well-defined needs. And by well-defined, we mean that they should come together in that sort of statement that you saw in the presentation by Mehroz, a way of address a problem for some users with a specific outcome. When we say problem, we mean something that in the world that could be made better or less badly in some cases. The users, or how Mehroz used the term population, but in this case, we decided to make it less ambiguous and call it users. These are the groups of people for whom this solution might improve their lives. And as was mentioned before, it shouldn't necessarily be consumers or like a group of specific private individuals. It could be a group of companies, it could be a group of researchers, it could be even a group of governments. But there should be someone who will benefit from this solution. And the last part, the outcome, is exactly what the benefit will be. So the results that could be potentially measured to make sure that this solution is a success or not. So this is the first part of the deliverables. And the second one is the so-called team contract. We are not obviously asking you to like go to a lawyer or a notary office and draft something like a legal document. But we do really encourage you to get together with your teams and discuss a couple of things that together are called, usually they are put in quotes. So those are the team contract details, like what are your expectations from this program? How much time and resources are you willing to dedicate? How do you divide responsibilities, if in any way, or everybody is doing everything? And then what do you do if somebody is not delivering or wants to quit, or any other conflict that arises? How do you solve them? So all of those things might sound quite self-explanatory and obvious. Again, we're not asking you to like draft a formal contract, but when you discuss them, and especially when you try to put them down on paper, just a couple of sentences, you might discover interesting things, and it will definitely help you to work smoother in the future. So this is not designed to be like a bureaucratic, pointless task, but this is more like a thing for you to do to make your life easier down the road. And a couple of practical details about the deliverables. You will have 2 weeks to do that. So again, with the need statements, this will probably be just the first iteration. So there's not, we're not giving you like months of time, but just a couple of weeks to start doing this and to then get feedback and maybe get back and do a couple more loops. And so formally the last day is the 21st of February. So it's the Sunday after the next one, end of day. And you can just submit it as a Word document. Don't make it long, but just be to the point. You can send it to our email or in any other way you find convenient. But probably it will be email. And one more thing that I wanted to mention is we will be there to answer any questions that you have along the way. So we've set up office hours on Mondays and Wednesdays from 4 to 5 p.m. where you can just tune in and ask anything, whether it's related to your team dynamics or it's related to the problem that you're tackling or design thinking in general. So either we are going to answer your questions, or if we don't know, we'll honestly tell you that we don't know, and we'll forward them to a person who probably knows better and will advise you. We ask you to please sign up for those in advance. So don't just pop up because there will be a mess. But you can use calendly.com/biocatalyst to set up a meeting so that we know in advance that somebody will be there. Do you have any questions with that regard?
Andrei, could you go back 2 slides? There was a request to see the, not the previous, but one before that.
This one?
Wait, no, I mean, I still see the previous one, I think. Yeah, this one. Just. Okay, guys, do you need more time on the slide? We will share the presentation, so there is no need to copy everything. Okay, I think that's it.
Good, thanks. Yeah, as Igor mentioned, we are going to upload this into the EIT platform. And just to make sure, we probably will also upload this into Google Drive, because we've gotten some feedback that it's a bit hard to navigate around the EIT platform, and we get it. Probably for the next year's program, we will make our own backend so that people can, so that it's tailor-made and people can find their way easier. But just as a very quick demo, I will show you where the media center is located. So can you see my browser? Okay, good. So if you have the Biocatalyst link directly, you can get to the group. If you don't, you go to alumni.eithealth.eu, which is the entire platform, and you go to groups. You can just scroll down and search for it, or you can just write Biocatalyst. So this is how you get to the group if you still don't have the path. And then in the group, you will see that there's a special menu for that specific group underneath the header image. So next to the logo, you will see a couple of things like members, events, news, and there you have the media center, where you will see folders as well as files. So those are either links or files which reside directly on the platform. And for example, in the folder for the second session, we will share all the presentations and all the rest of the information, as well as probably the announcement from the venture faculty. Alrighty. Good. So if everything is clear so far, again, ask us questions if you are stuck at some point. Just email us at hello@biocatalyst.eu or write on the platform. So to sum up, the next steps for you are starting to research into your topic, brainstorming the so to speak, the phase space of all the needs, and coming up with the 3 needs that you feel might be interesting to follow through with. Later, you will filter them down to just one, of course. But for now, it's important to see that there is kind of this space that you can explore, and there are more needs than you probably will see from the first attempt. Then second, discuss the team contract with your teammates and add a couple of lines about it to the Word document that you're going to send us. And of course, stay safe and take care. Good. If you don't have any other questions, this is all from us. Hope you had an interesting time, and we will have one more session like this, probably in March, in the second part of March. and we are working to make it interesting as well. If you have any feedback on the sessions themselves, also do please approach us, write us, and we are always happy to iterate as well. Thank you.
Maybe I just add one more point to what Andre has said. I know many of you want to jump into solutions because it's in many ways it's ideation, it's creative part, and it seems like more fun part to do. But what you're doing now, it's imagine you're building a house, and this is foundations of the house you're building. If you don't build a good foundation, whatever you build on top of it will be very shaky. All right, thank you. And if no questions, Andre, I guess we can finish today's session. Thanks everybody for joining, and we stay in touch. You know where to find us, and if you have questions, reach out to us or join office hours.
Cool. So thanks everyone, and have a great Saturday evening and Sunday, of course.